Rules in action. Rules that keep things going smoothly and fairly. Rules that help us get where we're going. Help us work together, play together, and live together. Of course, in small groups, we sometimes get along without rules.
But there aren't any loud noises, just the sounds of working. We call these work sounds. Listen.
When many of us play together, rules make the game. Rules help us play fair with each other, so all can enjoy the game. Rules that apply equally to all. It's up to each one of us to know the rules and follow them.
Why do you suppose this room is so quiet? Perhaps we can learn from the teacher.
At New York's Madison Square Garden, a city college quintet races by a fast and fancy wet beat from the University of Oregon. It's the opening contest of an intersectional doubleheader, and New York draws 2 points worth of first blood.
And you know, we have found that knowing when to be quiet is a part of growing up.
16,000 fans watch the boys from the Pacific Coast as they try to stem the onslaught of City College fever. But it's all over when Silverstein shoots off the hardwood, decades the ball, and the ball game for CCNY 38-36.
Because a quiet room helps all of us learn.
How do you do it?
Well, each of us knows how to work quietly. That's very important.
But the evening sports sport is a long way from the locker room. In the second game, a team of Northwestern Wildcats is matched against St. John's University of Brooklyn. The lads from Illinois are off to a springboard start when Bob Coble eases the Allen into the basket to take the lead.
Do you think you could walk this quietly? Listen to this work sound.
But tribal warfare comes to the gymnasium as the St. John's Indians retaliate with 2 points. From now on, the game is touch and go, with 10 men helping to get it there. A beautiful display of teamwork, and Northwestern gets in the number column with sharpshooting Bob Coble doing the honors.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Learn the Game, where you learn if you got an F for effort. And today, we're going to be talking about if NBA players have evolved from these lowly creatures of the 1940s till today of the pinnacle of basketball in the year of our Lord 2025. But first, before we get into that, Politicus Rex, how are you today, sir?
Pretty good, pretty good. Just fighting the hordes in the stores all day.
'Tis the season. Have NBA players evolved, or are they typically the same type of player that they've been for the last 100 years in respect to their physical capabilities, and then also their capability to play basketball just at large?
Well, this is where the semantics come into play. Players' skills, individual skills have evolved as the equipment has evolved, and drills, practice, what they focus on has evolved. But where a lot of fans that talk about how the game has evolved and how players have evolved and all that fail to recognize is the human has not evolved. And even if you want to go back to 1891, the human species has not evolved since then. So to see, like, I just brought this up actually. I hadn't even thought about this, but I actually just brought this up yesterday morning with someone who was talking about Wemby. And I mean, Wemby is basically Kareem. If Kareem had, joined the NBA in 2024 instead of 1969, he would be Wemby. And if Wemby had joined the NBA in 1969, he'd be playing like Kareem. To say someone as physically gifted as Kareem wouldn't be able to play like Wemby is ridiculous. They just didn't. They weren't allowed. If a guy 7'2", 7'3", sat there and went between his legs, around his back, and pulled up for a 3-point shot back then, and the ABA had 3-pointers back then, coach would yank him. No matter who he was, you'd get yanked. It's like, what are you doing? It was the coaching, the philosophy of the day that takes precedence. So many fanboys act like the players decide. Players don't decide much. All right, they play by the rules the owners put forth. In the league, the owners own, and they get paid by the owners. When people sit there and say LeBron couldn't have played in the 80s, of course he could. And he would have been one of the best. If anyone from the 80s played today that was one of the best, they'd be one of the best today because the player still has the same talent. To get back to Kareem, to sit there and say that Kareem could hit that sky hook so regularly, such an unstoppable shot, but then to say, oh, but you see, if he took 2 steps out and shot a 3, he wouldn't be able to do that. He didn't have that skill. That's ridiculous. Of course he could have if he had practiced it, but it wasn't something that they did in that day, guys of his side. But he had the hand-eye coordination. You could argue that his hand-eye coordination was the greatest of any center of all time. So, of course, he could hit threes if he grew up in this era. Just like if Wemby grew up in the 60s, he could hit a sky hook. But it's just the difference in rules, difference in equipment, difference in time and philosophies. The players are no better. They just emphasize personal skills more today because that's how the league that's the direction they've chosen to go in. But players today can't play team basketball. Watch any game at the highest level, the greatest game with the greatest players today. They can't play the game as well as the guys back in the 60s. Watch the teamwork of those teams. The 70s Knicks. Look at the teamwork involved in how they played. Russell Celtics, how they played. The teamwork that was involved. No team today plays with that kind of teamwork because the rules have changed to promote the individual over the team. Because if you sit there and you emphasize the team, you'll get a fan will buy 1 jersey. If you emphasize the player, well, that fan might buy 3 jerseys. You make 3 times the money because they want a Jordan jersey, a Pippen jersey, a Rodman jersey. Whereas if you promoted team, like back in the old days, they just buy a Bulls jersey of any player, and it would count as the Bulls jersey. That was a specific stern implementation was we're promoting players over teams.
So just to make it clear, how well do you think somebody like, you mentioned Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, how well do you think somebody that was considered athletic back in the past, very athletic, let's say Wilt Chamberlain, how well do you think he would be competitively athletic, assuming that he got that, he played basketball, that sort of stuff, and what if he had all of the equipment that supported him to get to that point? Do you think that he would be just as athletic or still the most athletic player in the league today?
Well, yeah, there's no big man in the league today as athletic as Wilt. None of them. You know, you can argue that Wemby is far more nimble, more agile, and that's true. But Wemby can't even begin to compete with Wilt when it comes to strength and stamina, the total athlete. And
Yeah.
Wilt was still faster than Wemby in a straight line. He just wasn't as agile. He wasn't nimble. But he was a locomotive. Once he took off in a straight line, it was full speed ahead. And then, his vertical, how high he could get, all of that type of stuff, the strength. There's no center today that physically can compare with what Wilt was.
The players of the past, let's say somebody like George Mikan, do you think he was or if you were to put him in a time machine, bring him to today, do you think he, among other great athletes of the past of the NBA, were capable enough to learn the skill sets to play NBA basketball for the new aspects of the game that have been brought into it with the rules changes and all of those sorts of things?
Well, the thing with Mikan is, even in the time that Mikan played, he was, very dominant, but he was still very limited. He had a limited game back then. What it was he broke the mold. So the rules had to be adapted to control or limit his effectiveness, because all the rules were made for the players that had come from the past. So when this guy comes in at 6'7" or 6'10", 270, 250 when he came in, 270 in his later years, and was tough, was strong. People get the idea like he wasn't much because he wore glasses, but he was a very physical guy, very tough, very rough. He was a bull in a china shop, and he bulldozed people. He played basically like Shaq, except you don't dunk and hang on the rim and everything back then. You couldn't do that. But he played that type of game. He was limited offensively as far as range. He was never a great shooter from distance. Never tried to be. Like I said earlier, that's not how centers played. But his huge advantage was under the basket. So coaches had him stay under the basket. So, but when you look at, how effective he was there, but that's also where he liked to play. He liked playing that role. So if he played today, I think you'd really just basically see the same player. He'd grab a lot of rebounds. He'd stop a lot of, drives. He'd lay the lumber on some guys when they would try and get in the middle, and he'd hit his hook shots. He'd hit his little turnaround jumpers. He'd grab offensive rebounds. He'd have power moves to the basket. He'd essentially play the same game, because that game for 134 years has always worked. There has never been a time in basketball's history, even today in the three-point era, that a guy that can just get the ball down low and score the ball down low isn't valuable.
In respect to how people think that whatever prior generation, and this goes across multiple generations of NBA fans, but I think that this needs to be emphasized, that your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your father, or the people within their generation, for the example of the players in the NBA during that time, they were, in respect to them being people, they were just as capable as the people are today with their physicality, their athleticism. The only difference is some of the the training mechanisms, some of the sports science aspects of things, but your grandfather, your great grandfather, even up to 1,000 years ago, and again, outside there's other things that get involved with it, were people just like you and me and anyone that you've ever known. And they were young too once for the older people that you've seen. So those guys were extremely capable players. They weren't just bums that couldn't play in today's NBA. I saw on the sidebar, I saw some mid-level, like he's a couple of years in the league. Not to say that he's a terrible player, but this one guy said that Michael Jordan would be an average player in today's NBA. I mean, what do you think about a statement like that?
It just proves. Who was that, Gil?
No, some guy named Ace Bailey. Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff like that. Look, if everyone that watches this is a basketball guy, you know that there's very few geniuses that play basketball. Okay, especially guys that have been like the star and the main man since they were 12 years old. They don't put a lot of thought, and they've been told their whole life that they're the best, they're the best, they're the best. So when they spout off something like that, I just chuckle and laugh and say, well, of course he thinks that he's been told that his whole life. But it's ridiculous. All you got to do is look at the numbers.
What do you say to somebody that says that the numbers don't count and they do this little internal aspect of trying to translate those numbers in today's NBA? Typically, there's really no criteria to it, or they use some sort of lazy adjustment numbers that some mathematicians made up.
I didn't say stats. We're talking about physical abilities. I'm talking numbers. I'm talking about a 40. I'm talking about a VO2 max. I'm talking about resting heart rate. I'm talking about, what they can lift. Those numbers don't lie. Okay? They don't lie. You can't sit here and take the best player from 30 years ago and say, okay, well, he ran this 40. He could jump this high. He could lift this much. His VO2 max is that. And his hands are like as big as oven mitts. But if he played today, he would just be average. Really? Because he surpasses you in every physical trait. What makes you think you'd be better than him? Because you wouldn't.
I'm gonna try to change the surgery date.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that.
But yeah,
you can keep going, Rex. My wife was just talking to me about something.
Oh, it's just one of those things that people they want. Their fans are going to root for their favorites, and they're going to stick with them no matter what. I'm not a fan. I don't care. It's just raw, objective material to me. I've played myself or coached or officiated games with guys that played in the ABA in the 60s, NBA in the 70s and 80s, NBA in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. And they all can play. Okay? They all could play. When I was young, just getting into playing, being picked up on the playground, just getting big enough that, I was a kid, but I was a kid that I could at least compete with the men on the playground. So I get picked up every once in a while. And I played with a guy that was in his 40s at the time, but he had been in the ABA in the 60s. And he was phenomenal. He looked like Larry Bird out there. He could do everything. Absolutely. He could dribble. He could rebound against big guys. He could defend. He could shoot. He was hitting shots with both hands, either hand. He was adept at everything. There was no skill he did not exhibit in that game, and was fluid. That's the big thing. When you see a world-class athlete by their fluidity. When you see how they move, it's like, oh, okay. Like I started in track and field, and so I hung around with a lot of, I had friends that were all state, in the 1800 meters, stuff like that. And I did the high jump. So I'm there with a bunch of guys that could really leap and long jump, triple jump, all of that. Guys that went on to college scholarships, in track and field. But when I met Abdi Billy, who was an Olympian at George Mason University, he just ran past me in a tracksuit. And there was no doubt that he was the best in the world. Just watching him pass me one time on an inside track. And he was still in a sweatsuit. He didn't even take off his sweatsuit. He was just warming up. In his glide, in the grace, his head never moved. And he's just warming up, and he's running faster than anyone I had seen. And it's like, oh, okay. That's what greatness looks like. It's like, until you actually see it right in front of you, you're just arguing stuff you don't know.
Yeah. And on this subject, it's, for people just kind of look at what greatness is today, and then they think, well, this guy is old, or I see something from 60 years ago, and then I pretend like that I would be able to compete with these guys just because what I see on this camera doesn't make sense to me, or I can't take into consideration the times or anything that has to do with reality versus just a perspective that isn't taking into account really just existence of what happened. I see something, I make an assumption about it, and then I take this video game model where I take what I see and I put it in front of me, and I can't even empathize with playing during that time. I mean, I think that's how a lot of people, they don't tell themselves that, even though I use the word I, but just I think that's what happens.
It's what it is the word is called empathy. And people cannot put themselves in other people's positions and substantially or adequately put themselves into someone else's world and feel the effects. Like guys talking about taking days off and blah, blah, blah. And these modern players, they're so soft. Okay. And how Larry Bird played hurt and could barely move and had a back brace. And it's like, okay, Larry Bird had a family. He had many commitments. He had, the commitments of a man, right? Husband, father, the whole deal. And he's making, $3-4 million a year. Okay. Well, you got to get out there and play. Right? Because $4 million a year, that's a whole lot. But your career, that money is encompassed into a 10, even if you play 20 years, 20-year career, and you're out. For those of you who are military, 20 years in the military, then you retire. And, then you're like, okay, what do I do for the next 40 years? If Bird was making $50 million a year, like the max players do now, Bird is sitting out those games. He's not risking his body if he's making $50 million a year. because that's generational wealth for your grandkids, great grandkids, all of it. That is security for your bloodline. He's sitting out, and the owner is making him sit out because they're guaranteed contracts, and he gets hurt. I still got to pay him the $50 million. I'm not going to lose $50 million. You're sitting out. And that's what fanboys don't understand. It's a business. It's professional basketball. You know?
But really, how would you weigh athleticism against skill set in basketball? What's more important if you wanted to put some
Today,
general percentage point on it?
Well, today it's athleticism. And that's obvious and inarguable. They've reduced the draft down to 1 or 2 rounds, and 2 rounds, I guess, and they draft purely on potential. The drafted players are mostly 19, 20, 21 years old. They're not great yet. They have great potential. None of them are great players yet by NBA standards. Obviously, by average us guy standards, yes, they're phenomenal. But they're all being drafted on potential. It's not like back in the 70s, 80s, when guys, you saw them coming out of college. Some would come out in 3 years, but most of them would play 4 years in college and then come out, and you had that big buildup because they had to make their money. They had to make their name so they could get their money. Now everything is guaranteed. Everything is preset. After your freshman year, well, if I go pro, then I don't have to play college anymore. So-and-so says they want to draft me. They're going to be somewhere around the 15 to 22 draft line. So I'm going to make this much, and it's guaranteed over 3 years. And I got 3 years to make my name to get the second contract where the big money comes. Where back in the day, it didn't work that way. Every year, the top draft pick would get more and more and more and more. Like Ewing was the highest paid guy in the league because of his being the number one draft pick in the first lottery that was ever held. He was always, for most of his career, was the highest paid basketball player in the NBA. And that's because he made his name at Georgetown. So he went number one. If he would have went a year early, he probably would have been playing in Portland. And he wouldn't have made as much money. He wouldn't have made as big a splash. You know what I mean? So it's all the business side of it. But now it's all drafted on potential. So you don't draft on what they can do with the ball, their actual skills. You draft on their potential with their athleticism. Back in the day, athleticism, here's where the biggest change is, and this is what 99% of fans don't understand about rules. Rules are, in the modern game, rules are made to promote a predetermined style of play. Okay, the NBA says, okay, we want this kind of game. This is the product we want to put out to the world. So we're going to adjust the rules to get that result. That wasn't the way the rules came about up until Stern. All the way up until 1980, into the beginning of the 80s, all the rules were made to level the playing field. When Mikan came in, who was physically dominant, that the rules of the day did not work for him because he was simply just too big and strong. So they had to change rules to limit Mikan to make the games fair. Then Wilt comes along, Russell first, then Wilt, and they change rules to limit the exceptional athletes' ability to use their athletic ability. That, now they turned it around when they decided that they're going to promote individual players, individual faces, not team loyalty anymore. We're going these guys are stars. They're on the same par as a rock star, movie star, NBA star. They're all, at one point, the two most famous people in the world were Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson. They were like right here as far as fame.
Yeah.
Worldwide. And that's crazy. That would have never happened under the old rules. Because if they had kept the rule, the way of making the philosophy, the rule, when Jordan came in and was just so quick, just cat quick, and could hang in the air, and his hands were so big he could just palm the ball and he could just make you look silly, make some of the best players in the world look silly because he can just play keep away, palming the ball. In past generations, they would have made rules to stop him from being able to do that athletic stuff. And they would have limited his use of his athletic ability to make a fair game because the rules were bigger than the players. The rules of the game. The game was the biggest thing. You wanted to see a pristine game. Then they started promoting players. So rules started changing. They started manipulating rules to stop this type of play and promote that type of play. And that's where we're at now. Now it's just an homogenized, product, like a video game, to catch people's attention. The quick clicks of the three-pointer and the dunk. And you have to go all the way back to 1986. ESPN had Play of the Day and top 10 plays of the day. And then they'd have Play of the Year. And in 1986, the Play of the Year was a play where Robert Parrish grabbed a rebound, outletted it to the side from under the basket. He was pinned under the basket after he got the defensive rebound. So he passed out to McHale on the side. McHale put it ahead, I believe, to Dennis Johnson, who put it cross court to Larry Bird coming over half court, who fired it to Danny Ainge for a layup. They scored in 4 seconds. All 5 players touched it. No dribbles taken. And everyone was talking at the time about how perfect a basketball play that was. That play wouldn't even make the list for top 10 plays of the hour today.
No.
Would not. Guy grabs a flat-footed rebound at one end. They pass it around, and the, white guy that everyone hated and wanted to punch in the face gets a left-handed layup at the other end. Nobody'd care. Nobody would care about that play today. 40 years ago was Play of the Year because that's when the game mattered. And being able to play the game. Half the guys in the NBA couldn't even participate in that play probably today. Because how they've been taught at AAU, they wouldn't have looked to those spots to make those passes.
Yeah.
And Ainge wouldn't have ran diagonal to the basket to get the left-handed layup. He was a three-point shooter. He would have ran down the court and stopped right at the three-point line, waving his arms. Because he would have had a wide-open three. And today they tell you that taking a wide-open three is better than taking a wide-open layup, which is bull.
Yeah.
And they can say it all they want for the last 10 years. All you have to do is look at the NBA champions, and it's not true.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. I know the question kind of went off in a different direction, but I know that the NBA. I do know the NBA, or I think that the NBA is drafting off of potential versus skill.
Yeah.
But I'm asking more so in playing basketball. What is more important, to be more athletic or be more skillful? Not for the NBA.
More athletic because that's what they're selecting. If you want to play at a higher level, you have to prove your athletic dominance. That's what I'm explaining.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
Remember, you don't decide how far you go. This is the thing that guys that play down at the Y don't understand with most fans. You don't decide how long you're going to play. You don't decide where you're going to play. You don't decide how you're going to play. Other people decide that for you. And if you want to play in the NBA, you can be there are guys that played in China for 15 years that were better skilled basketball players than most of the guys in the NBA, but they didn't make an NBA roster because they didn't have the athleticism. Guys like Dan Dickau, guys like that are, skill-wise in the top 100 players in the world, but they're not elite athletes, so they can't compete in the NBA where the rules have been loosened to where guys can use their athleticism to defend you.
What about the guys like Jokic and Doncic that are considered less athletic? Now, is it a misconception about their athleticism, or do their skills supersede their perceived lack of athleticism?
Well, they don't rely on athleticism. They rely on their skill. Well, when you say athleticism, most fans just think speed and jumping. That's athleticism. Speed and jumping. But, are great baseball hitters and great baseball pitchers, are they great athletes?
No, they can't jump or run fast.
Yeah, but their hand-eye coordination and tendon strength are absolutely insane. It's the same thing with Jokic and, Luka, guys like that. They know how to move their bodies. It's hard to explain. They don't get lost in the game. They don't, if you know horses, the blinders that will be on horses. Yet most players play with blinders. And they predetermine their moves, where they're going to go. This is why I hate basketball camps where their coaches will sit there and teach 300 kids to do the exact same thing in the exact same situation. That's the most ignorant thing ever. I used to be able to just walk. I used to coach at basketball camps, free throws usually. And then I'd go out and I would play these same kids, on the playgrounds because I was only a few years older now. And I would lock up kids that were way better than me and ended up with their potential going far higher than me, as in their success in the sport. But at the time, at their age and my age, I would totally lock them up just because I just coached at the basketball camp that they were just a student at. I know everything they just been taught, and I know they're out there on the court and they're going to try and implement it. So I know what pump fake they're going to do. I know the jab step and then the pass and then the diagonal. I know exactly what they're going to do because I was just at the same basketball camp. And then I would do stuff completely unorthodox and quirky on purpose because guys couldn't cover me because they're taught, okay, you play with your hands like this and you move your feet like this and you square your hips and you keep your hand, you do all this stupid stuff, right? Looking like a little robot on defense. And I would sit there and toy with them. Like they'd be sitting there and told there'd be a coach with a ball and they'd hold a ball up like this and 20 defenders would go like this. And then the coach would move the ball down here and these defenders would go boom, and they'd move into this pose and they do all these poses. And I would sit there and I'd get the ball and I would just move the ball around and watch them all go into those poses. And the guys would laugh and say, look, you're making them dance. They're like robots. They don't think. And that's what tells me they don't know the game. They don't understand the game.
Yeah.
But that's the problem with modern basketball is they teach you individual moves. And this is what you do if this guy does that. if this guy does this, then you're supposed to come over here, and you create this spacing. Like, all I hear in the last 20 years is they tell people, like, they have this thing, oh, well, you have to space guys out at the 3-point line to open up driving lanes.
Yeah.
How the hell did Oscar Robertson get to the basket in 1960 then? I never needed someone to open up a driving lane for me. I made it myself. That's what Isaiah Thomas did. That's what Dr. J did. You know, Magic Johnson, you don't sit there and you yell at Byron Scott, get back out to the 3-point line so you can open up a driving lane for me, Byron. No. It's stupid. That's a bunch of non-skilled people trying to sound like coaches. I don't need you to set me a pick. I don't need you to open up the space to open up a driving lane. If my man does not play proper defense, I will have the driving lane, and I'm going to draw the defense to me, and I'm going to dish to the spot that they vacated.
Yeah, and that's even if they double team you, like you're saying, you can pass the ball, or typically if they're reacting to catch up and switch on to you, often they're not ready enough to even defend you well, so that you could draw the foul from them if you're taking a shot. So it's another aspect of it.
Well, the secret to passing out of a double team is you don't wait for the double team.
Yeah.
You never wait for the double team. You anticipate the double team, and then you fire your pass as soon as the defender makes the commitment coming towards you. Once he hits that point of no return, where he's in the middle ground and useless. If you sit there and hold the ball and wait for the double team to actually get to you, you're letting yourself get surrounded. And you've just cut down your vision by 50%, and you've given the defense time to rotate. If you watch a game and watch a guy get double teamed and then pass into a turnover, you'll see that that's what he does, is the double team will come, then he'll look to pass, but the third defender is rotating and gets the steal. The secret to passing out of a double team is you never pass out of a double team. You pass as the double team comes, where he's left his man, but he's not to you yet. Then you pass to the open spot that he just vacated, where your man is supposed to run to the spot that he just vacated. And now you've created a very difficult situation for the defense, because the man nearest to the ball is actually facing away from the ball, because he's coming towards you for the double team, if you can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No one teaches that stuff. They teach how to go between your legs, behind the back, and all this stuff to get away from the defender. Don't get away from your defender. Suck more defenders towards you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I know we talked about a lot here. I haven't had a lot of people show up. Not one comment, even though there's that one really means that there's 300 people watching right now.
Well, it's Friday and we're coming up on Christmas, so
yeah.
I'm hoping we'll get some comments once it's posted and people are able to check it out on our channels over the weekend.
Yeah. But let's I think it's probably a good time to shut this thing down. But before that, what do you want to leave the people in respect to this concept of that people should recognize the similarities of basketball players past? What do you have to say about that? Like, what is one lasting thing you want people to think about on the subject?
That rules change, philosophy change, equipment changes, but humans don't. Okay, Oscar Robertson or Bob Cousy, Magic Johnson, and Jokic, they all read the court the same way.
What about Bob Cousy?
Yeah, Bob Cousy, he read the court the same way Jokic does today.
Yeah.
They're all inside the game. The game moves around them. Everything's in total focus.
Yeah.
They're not having to think during the game. They're reacting to their teammates' movements and the defense's movements. It's always been that way. The best player in 1905 did the same thing. They're hamstrung by the rules and the philosophies of the coaching philosophies of the day. Players are players. Okay, there was a thing back in the 60s that, nowadays they allow playground style play in the NBA. They did 20 years ago. Jason Williams made it to the NBA and was very good in the NBA playing playground ball. Remember, there was a time when if you played that type of fancy dribbling playground ball with no look passes and all that, they wouldn't let you in the league. The powers that be, the owners, the coaches, the managers, they wouldn't let you in the league. But guys could do that. That's what created the playground legend. That's why there's no playground legends today. Because if you're good, they take you. Some league will take you. Well, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, if you played that way, out of control as far as a coach was concerned, then you didn't play. So your only place was to play on the playgrounds, and that's what brought the legend of the playground legend. That's where that came from. Is these guys are as good as anybody you see in the NBA. But that's because that type of play wasn't allowed in the NBA. Now it is. So there are no playground legends. You don't hear anybody. Show me the YouTube videos of guys that are dominating on the playground, but have never played in an organized league and dominated. They don't exist. Because if you can dominate on a basketball court, you're in some league somewhere getting paid. And that's what fans need to understand. The times change. The opinions and viewpoints of the people in power change. Players don't change.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Rex, for the show. Are you available tomorrow sometime?
Yes.
Okay. I will get with you offline about that if you want to show on the regular time slot. But I appreciate you coming by. I hope your Christmas shopping goes better when it's not as mobbed.
Yeah. I'll put on my Kevlar and what's the topic going to be for tomorrow? Any idea?
I have to look at the list again. How about we do Mike can only play with white players?
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that one. But we'll talk about that. And appreciate you coming on. And everyone, learn the game.
Yes.